Good afternoon. How are you today? Well, it's beautiful out, and the breaking news of yesterday is developing. I'm thinking of Tennessee, and it would be a horrible, embarrassing thing to any person that thought that they were tolerant and not bigoted and not a soldier in a war of discrimination against blacks and supporters of guns without restraint in Tennessee, where Smith & Wesson has its factory. So that's going to continue for a while. But there are a couple of other things kicking around that may sound funny, that are not funny at all. For example, there's a debate about artificial intelligence on the Hill. Now, isn't that perfect in two ways? Is the Hill jam-packed with artificial intelligence, particularly about artificial intelligence? Because I think there are only a couple of people on both sides of the Hill, Senate and the House, that have a clue about how these issues work. And when I was younger, I programmed IBM 360, and then the IBM 370, they added 10 degrees to the circle. I also wired machines and things like that. But I never got close to this kind of stuff, artificial intelligence, because I was off doing other things. And I did get a master's in information science, which is more like having an ability to understand the metaphors by which people really do this. So what does that get us? Artificial intelligence is here to stay, and some people want to stamp it out like they'd stamp out a demand for equality or for, well, any of the rights that we think and we take too much for granted. And who is going to decide this? People on the Hill have no idea what artificial intelligence is. And of course we have scampering around the room guys like Yudkowsky. And Yudkowsky is a guy who, he is terrified of artificial intelligence. He's the author of a thing, which I haven't read, but the title is provocative, Harry Potter and the Methods of Rationality. He really believes that if we persist with artificial intelligence, we're facing a doomsday machine. Imagine the picture of a man with his arm raised and terrible things happening. There's no question that science is a double-edged sword, but having members of Congress figure out what to do about it, that sounds like a terrible thing. And the notion of artificial intelligence does all sorts of things that are, quote, useful. So how are we going to abridge this technology? I'm not saying we shouldn't look into it, because I'd be as bad as these guys if I said that. But we have to put together the machinery that is of people and experts to analyze this and to get off these doomsday messages that they have. Another thing that feels right out of 1984 is there's a debate in the land about the term Latinx, Latin, and then X. And the idea is, some feel strongly that, and this is particularly true among some people who feel discriminated against because of sex or sexual preference and things like that, sexual identity. And so they don't want to be labeled as Latino or Latina. And so they prefer to be Latinx, so that it's not a grouping into male or female, into gender. And I understand that. And some might prefer, the parents, the older generation, identify with Mexican, mestizo. They want that kind of identification. I don't think they're mutually exclusive. The notion in 1984 was to outlaw certain words, because if people didn't have access to the words, then they couldn't have the thought. And I see it at the least as an assertion by some about the concerns about how they're treated. Now, you could say, they're just doing this out of the blue. Well, you'd have to forget what Trump did the day he announced as he came down the Golden Staircase, flames leaping out of his brain, and he immediately leaped into the gutter and attacked people who are Hispanic, Latino, Latina, Latinx, who are coming into this country. And some may be good, but the rest, you got to worry. So he put out front and center his bias, his bigotry against persons of color, of other origins. And so we can't say it's irrelevant to use words that represent policies that need to be focused on. And as we see the leadership in the Republican Party doing what it can to dehumanize and delimit and destroy the individual rights of women, of children with guns, of people of color, of, every manner of individual liberty is at risk with these guys and gals. So we have to keep that in mind. Now, I am very excited that Biden is going to Ireland, and he's going to my county. County Mayo is where the Flannerys come from. I have joked that the Flannerys come down from a direct line of bishops. It's not true. We did have a lot of Flannerys who played the Gaelic sports games, and Holly and I were in Dingle Bay once, and as I was leaving town, I was getting gas, and somebody said, there are hundreds of Flannerys in town here, and that's not in County Mayo, it's south of County Mayo. And I said, really? And he said, oh yeah, some are in science, and some run this ship that goes around the bay. So I came out and I said to Holly, let's go see them. And we went there, and sure enough, they were there. And I arrive, and as I'm arriving there with Holly, this woman says, in a very deep and profound and pleasing Irish brogue, says, who do you be? And I said, I'm John Flannery. And she says, no, you're not. He is. And then she pointed this other man there who was named John Flannery. So I went out on the ship, and I learned that the Flannerys were from County Mayo. But one time there was a terrible storm, and these two brothers went out to sea in the storm, and they assumed that they were lost forever. But when they came to shore, they realized that God must have sent them to Dingle Bay, and so the family of Flannerys in Dingle Bay have been there ever since. Does that sound like an Irish story? Well, everybody in the village knew that story. So Biden's going to County Mayo, and I'm hoping that some of that feisty independence that he needs for the fight ahead will rub off on him. And then we also have, as I hop around, there's the question of mifepristone, forgive me for mispronouncing it, the abortion pill. And what we have is, we have a single congressman in Texas who has a bias against all abortions, saying that the FDA should not be able to distribute these abortion pills. Now let's go back on this a little bit. Do you know how this started, right? The progressives in 1906, June 30th, 1906, they passed a bill, I believe it was called the Wiley Act, W-I-L-E-Y. And do you know who supported it? You think it was a Democrat? No. Teddy Roosevelt. The progressives then believed that we should have a Food and Drug Administration. And so for all that history from 1906 to now, to assure us of getting safe or safer drugs and food, we've had this agency. And there's one clown who has no business being on the bench in Texas. He's going to tell the FDA, with his infinite non-wisdom, mark stupidity, what should happen with this abortion pill, because he has this notion that people don't have a right or dominion over themselves, particularly women. And this is a phenomenon we see all the time now. So we're in troubled waters, but I hope we're moving forward in it. And the fact that the debate is along the lines I've suggested right now, I think that's helpful, because in the end, maybe we can stop all these losers who would compromise our individual rights and liberties and have no sense or sensibility about our process, that we are equal, and that the Constitution does say to provide for the general welfare, and that sure sounds like the Food and Drug Administration. So that's it for me today. have a good evening, and I hope to see you tomorrow for my Cathedral of Trees. Bye-bye.